Mm-hmm. All right. So, Fabiano, I have an interesting question for you. I was curious to find out more about the cost of living difference between Sao Paulo and other places in Brazil, especially perhaps other places in Sao Paulo state. And I can tell you what I know about that because I have a lot of friends who live next to Sao Paulo, but not really in the Sao Paulo city. And I think many of them have to commute to their work in Sao Paulo every day. And I know that this commute is very hectic. I mean, they have a lot of troubles getting to work every day. So I was thinking maybe you can tell us a little bit more about that. Like, what's the difference in cost of living between the central city and the suburbs and maybe Sao Paulo state? And is it common for people to actually live far away from the city and still commute every day to their work? Mhm.
First of all, the cost of living, the price of
Mhm.
rental
Mhm. Mhm.
in a downtown area, or near the places where the commercial, the business centers in Sao Paulo is really high.
Mhm.
You know,
Mhm.
you can it does a small apartment with room in a kitchen, or a kitchenette as they call it, is 1,200 reais a month, uh, plus the utilities. So it will probably go as high with internet and light and water. It will probably go as high as 1,500, 1,600. The buildings downtown, you have to pay extra for the parking lot. So
Mhm.
if you have a car, you will pay another extra 300. So that can easily go up to 200 if you live in a small apartment that will only probably fit you,
Mhm.
and in a very close partner, because it's a real small apartment. And
Mhm.
for a place, for a apartment with 2 or 3 rooms, the rental can go up to 5,000 reais a month. And so that's very expensive. So most of people that set up families and they have jobs, they have to move from the areas that are farther away from downtown,
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
and which are the neighboring cities, Santo André, São Caetano, São Bernardo, Mogi, Cotia, and so on.
Mm. So is it common for people to commute, live in Campinas or live in Santos and commute every day to São Paulo? So is it like a lot of people do that, or just only a few people do that?
It's very common. I can tell about Santos because, as you know, I'm from there, and
Mhm.
most of my friends are still there. You have to take those. There are special buses that take professionals every day. Those buses can go from 400 to 800, 900 a month,
Mhm.
and uh, they people, and that makes people that live in Santos having to leave Santos around 4 or 5 in the morning so they can make it to work. So it's a very extenuating experience to
Mhm.
leaving Santos and to work in São Paulo. But I don't know, we maybe can be talking about uh, 50,000, maybe 60,000 professionals going out
Mhm.
every day. That means thousands of buses going from São Paulo to Santos. It's 1.5, 2 hours ride from way to go and the way back.
Mm. So basically, from what I understand, people have no choice. They could move to downtown São Paulo, and then they don't need to commute. But in that case, they will have to pay a lot of money. They will have to pay basically all their salary just to compensate for the rents
It
and.
depends on how much they make. Most of them actually keep that plan of they start in the company, they don't
Mhm.
make enough to move, and once they get promoted, they choose to, because they don't want to waste that much time, inside the bus. So
Mhm.
they once they are promoted, they move, downtown São Paulo. That's usually the case. And of course, those that have like wife and family, children, they cannot do that because they would have to be really in a high position in their jobs to move to Sao Paulo. So
Mhm.
they still choose to live either in neighboring cities or farther away from downtown, which may take, you may drive. Is still in the city of Sao Paulo, If you live further, if you live far from downtown, you can still in drive. It can still take 2 hours, 2.5 hours for you to get to your job. So it's pretty rough.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, and also I think one problem is that there is not much of public transportation. So basically, it's only buses, and there is no train to get to Sao Paulo. I know there are some trains to get to suburbs, but I don't think there is a train to Santos or Campinas. So that's quite interesting.
There are trains that go on Sao Paulo and on neighboring cities,
Hmm.
but the rent in this case, if you to rent a house next to a station that will make it quicker for you to get to your work, is still very expensive.
Hmm. So overall, Sao Paulo is a very expensive place to live, isn't it? Like in your experience, how would you rank Sao Paulo, living in Sao Paulo versus living in Santos? Hmm.
Santos is an expensive city too. Santos can be very expensive. São Paulo, it can be cheaper because there's so many different. There's so many stores and so many options that you can actually make your living cheaper than you do in Santos. Uh, but
Hmm. Hmm.
as for the cost of living overall, they are
Hmm.
pretty much comparable because there's a high uh, wave of people moving to Santos because they prefer living in Santos, which is smaller and has the beach, instead of living in the city, which is full of traffic basically the whole day, and with the basic problems of a big city like violence and crime and
Hmm.
and stressed people. So there's this big movement from Sao Paulo to Santos, so that makes the cost of living in Santos pretty similar to what it is in Sao Paulo.
But the opportunities, the job opportunities are a lot lower, smaller in Santos compared to.
Uncomparably lower. The
Mhm.
salaries in Santos can be up to 3 times less than they are
Mhm.
in Sao Paulo. So if a programmer makes 6,000 in Sao Paulo, he will make 2,000 living in Santos.
Yeah,
And
that's a big.
plus, so adding to that, you have in Sao Paulo you have the big companies, and in Santos you have smaller local companies that don't offer the opportunity to grow. So the professional
Mhm.
eventually has to move to Sao Paulo, and I believe that's the reason why Sao Paulo is so full of people.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, in your experience, just I'm curious. In your experience, can you give us one example of product that is maybe overpriced in São Paulo, like something you have to pay a lot of money to buy it in São Paulo, but also maybe one example of product that is not very expensive, like maybe some food, maybe some other products. Like what can be reasonably priced in São Paulo?
In Sao Paulo, I think that you have a number of restaurants.
Mm-hmm.
What I consider really cheap in Sao Paulo is for you to get a pizza. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you can basically eat pizza every dinner because every night at dinner because there's always a pizza place near you, and they can get really cheap. And of course there are these big marketplaces where you can buy electronics and all sorts of gadgets, usually coming from China, and those can be very cheap too. I mean, the cheapest place to find them in Brazil,
Mm-hmm.
places like Santa Efigênia and 25 de Março.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And what is expensive, another thing that I would say is cheap, is gas. You'll
Mm-hmm.
find the cheapest gas stations in the country probably in São Paulo too. And on the other hand, what is considered very expensive is rent. I think rent
Mm-hmm.
is the number one expensive thing in São Paulo.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, parking lots. If you go down anywhere downtown in São Paulo, you won't be able to park your car, for 30 minutes, if so, for less than 20 reais. That's like $6, $7.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That
What
so
about
the parking lot is $6, $7 an hour.
What about public transport? Like for public transport, is it expensive to move around Sao Paulo using public transport, or is it relatively inexpensive?
Compared to other big cities around the world, especially in developed countries, it is expensive.
Mm-hmm.
You can use one of those cards that you can get moved from trains to buses.
Mm-hmm.
You don't not having to pay the full fare, but it still is quite expensive. You know, the bus is usually around 3 reais. You know, it's usually $1, and the same goes for trains. So if you don't have the card, you know, every commuting that you have to do, you have to pay, you know, 1 real and or sorry, 3 reais or $1,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's relatively expensive comparing to the average income of the city, I think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So basically, from what you're saying, I just keep thinking that maybe some Brazilian professionals they moved to São Paulo and they started working and they started to pay a lot of money because the cost of living is high. And I think that at least some of them have incentive to go back or to go to a different city in Brazil, and maybe they can earn still money, but they don't have to pay so much. So I'm just thinking, do you think, in your experience, are there many people who actually want to move out of Sao Paulo to other cities in Brazil and basically save money? Or do you think that still people still want to stay in Sao Paulo because the job opportunities are good?
The only one place in Brazil really that there are opportunities to work for the big companies is São Paulo at the moment. Of
Mhm,
course, there are other big companies scattered around the country, but they are few and far between. They are nothing compared to São Paulo. In São Paulo, it's a place where if you get to lose your job, you can get to find another one. If you are in centers like, you know, Campinas, or even outside the state of São Paulo, as in Rio or Belo Horizonte, you know, Porto Alegre, if you lose your job, the chances of you finding a similar one are very low, and then you have to move to São Paulo. But you know, interestingly enough, most of the people that are living in São Paulo right now, they want to move. Most of the people in São Paulo are not from São Paulo naturally,
yeah.
and they have this idea of, no, someday I'm gonna move back to, you know, my hometown, or move to somewhere calmer, you know, which is to say that every person that lives in Sao Paulo is trying to leave it somehow.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. Yeah, that's interesting. That's yeah, I know São Paulo is a mix of cultures. I mean, Brazilian cultures. I mean, people are from everywhere, and I think it's a very interesting mix of people and cultures. Mhm,
That's definitely true.
mhm,
I don't know the world so much, but I would say that there are very few places where you can see so many different people. You know, so much, you know, variety of products and food as you do in São Paulo, and they all using the same space
mhm, mhm,
relatively peacefully. So, and that's, I think it's a good quality of Sao Paulo. You know, it's a place really for all cultures, and there's really opportunities for everybody. It's an interesting place, and it can be a beautiful city. If you like big cities, it can be a great experience for you. But if you really don't like big cities, if you don't like traffic, if you don't like rush, then you're definitely in the wrong place.
mhm. Yeah, I see. I see. Okay, yeah, thanks a lot, Fabiano, for sharing your ideas,
Thank
and
you.
yeah, we're looking forward to next video. Mhm.
Very nice. So we'll see you next video.
Yeah,
Nice.
thanks a
Thank you,
lot.
Mijo. See you.